This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were pretty robust today after some positive data from China boosted expectations of a recovery from the COVID-19 downturn. Now, also, drug makers are seeking fast approval for their vaccines, and authorities look set to keep that stimulus support up. Interesting bright spot on the continent today. Ghana's markets have regained some shine for investors ahead of the December 7th elections. We saw its bonds were the third best performing in emerging markets last week, returning 2.5%. Of course, investor confidence has been boosted by hopes that post-election Ghana will resume the path of economic reforms. Now, also coming up on today's show. South Africa forecasts slow recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. Tunisia's parliament approves a supplementary bill to cushion pandemic impact. And drug makers seek approval for the COVID-19 vaccines. Well, let's start off today's show in South Africa. The country's economic recovery from the coronavirus crisis is likely to be slow and difficult. That is according to the country's central bank. Now, the Reserve Bank kept its main lending rate at 3.5% last week after steep cuts earlier in the year. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more details from Johannesburg.
On the other hand, the local mining and agricultural sectors have helped to turn the economy around in the third quarter.
The third quarter was 40% better than the second quarter. So if you just take that straight and you say we 0.8% of or 8% of the economy, that gives you a 4 percentage points just coming from us, and agriculture was better. So there's been a huge V-shaped uptick.
The economic recovery is not even, with some sectors doing better than others.
It's going to take a long time to recover from this. We are not looking at a V-shaped recovery, as some economists have described it in other places. We're looking more at what some have described as a K-shaped recovery. It will get back to where it was for those that are on the upper end or who are more well off, and professionals who can work from home. Those who are at the bottom of the economic ladder, that they are going to struggle.
According to The Economist, the mining data masks an issue that is playing into the country's favor.
So tonnage is actually still down was down in September by 13%. But value-wise, we've been doing very well because we saw a 25% improvement in commodity prices in rand terms, and the rand is still about 12% lower than the year before on a 12-month basis.
Eskom remains the main stumbling block, and not only because of its inability to provide reliable energy. The utility is attempting to increase its tariffs and recoup past operating costs.
The number is 71 billion that they want, that they say they are in arrears. Now, how that is going to be liquidated is the word that's been used. So how is it going to be phased in? We don't know.
While job creation remains a critical component of the new Reconstruction and Development Plan, there is another pressing need.
The other side is to bring back demand, because what we are seeing is a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, have struggled as a result of declining demand. So it's your customer interfacing type businesses. So businesses retailers or who might run restaurants or small operations, they are going to be struggling.
Regardless of what you do and what business environment you're operating in, the recovery in South Africa is going to be a long and difficult one. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's shift focus now. The world's two largest producers of cocoa, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, have accused several big chocolate companies and traders of trying to sidestep a premium on cocoa prices, which is meant to help fight farmer poverty. Now, the Ivorian Coffee and Cocoa Council and the Ghana Cocoa Board say that companies including Mars, Hershey's and Olam are trying to avoid a $400 per ton living income differential, or LID. that is added to the price of cocoa bought from Ghana and Ivory Coast. The heightened tensions come after Hershey's last month took the rare step of sourcing its cocoa beans from the futures market in New York. Analysts said the purchase through the exchange meant Hershey's did not have to pay the LID price. Now, regulators from the two nations sent a letter to Hershey's banning the Pennsylvania company from operating chocolate sustainability programs in the two nations. Well, let's get the latest on this from Nabil Ahmed Rufai. He joins us now in Accra. Nabil, always good to have you on the show. Now, we certainly know that Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are angry about Hershey's recent move to buy a record amount of cocoa futures on the ICE exchange. But what exactly are some of the other ways that Ghana believes that big chocolate companies are using to try circumvent the LID or this new premium on cocoa prices?
Well, Uche, they have also stated issues for the fact that Hershey is getting some assistance from industry players in bypassing the payments of the living income differential, and they've pointed accusing fingers at Fuji Oil Holdings US-based subsidiary, which is Bloomer, of also helping Hershey to sidestep the payments of their LID. But the main issue has had to do with the fact that Hershey is trying to get large quantities of the cocoa from their ICE futures, and through that is bypassing the payments of the LID. So this is what we know for now, Uche.
Well, the matter has become pretty serious because these two nations are now reviewing their membership of the Federation of Cocoa Commerce. Give us a sense of why they're escalating it to this point.
Indeed, Uche, the two top cocoa producers, Ghana and Ivory Coast, have actually said that they suspect the fact that these federations are conniving with Hershey to avoid payment of the living income differential, which is $400 per ton of cocoa. And you know that the federation has the mandate of protecting and also regulating cocoa trade. And if these two top cocoa producers, Ghana and Ivory Coast, have a feeling that the mandate of the federation is not being worked on to their advantage, they feel it's time for them to review their membership with this particular federation. And that's the main issue, the fact that the federation, they accuse the federation of conniving with Hershey to avoid the payment of the living income differential, which is meant to really improve the well-being of poor cocoa farmers.
Well, these big chocolate companies, Nabil, had actually agreed to pay the $400 per ton premium on cocoa beans, which of course started in October. But looking realistically at the cocoa market right now, the pandemic has hit chocolate demand, and as a result, these companies are looking to cut their costs now. So what does this mean for the LID program going forward if these companies can't afford it, and especially now that regulators have also banned some of them from operating chocolate sustainability programs in their countries?
Exactly, Uche. What it means is that these poor cocoa farmers that this living income differential is targeting to help will not really benefit from such a scheme. Both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire decided they would want to improve the well-being of these cocoa farmers who have been impoverished for a very long time, thereby adding the $400 per ton of cocoa. And of course, right as you rightly said, the impact of coronavirus has really affected the demand for chocolate, and these big chocolate makers are not really buying the cocoa, and it's something that is very worrying, because if the two top cocoa producers are not selling the cocoa, they will not be able to get the LID that will be channeled into improving the welfare of the poor cocoa farmers. So for now, we can say that the farmers are not benefiting, are not seeing the benefits of the LID or what it sought to really achieve when last year these two top cocoa producers, Ghana and Ivory Coast, decided this is the way that they would want to go. It's quite a difficult time at the moment with all these situations that's really coming up in terms of these big chocolate makers trying to sidestep the payments of the LID, and also with this whole coronavirus situation affecting the sales of cocoa. Uche.
Well, as always, many thanks, Nabil, for some insight into that issue. That, of course, is Nabil Ahmed Rufai joining us there in Accra. Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Kenya's KCB Group wants to acquire a bank in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the next 2 years once it wraps up $40 million deals in Tanzania and Rwanda. Now, entrance into the Central African nation with a population of over 84 million people will mark the 7th market outside Kenya for KCB. Group CEO Joshua Oigara says the lender is keen on searching for new opportunities and believes DRC is the most likely next destination. And Standard Bank, Africa's largest bank by assets, says it will take years for losses from bad debts to recover to the group's targeted range, indicating the mountain the country's banks still have to climb in order to put the pandemic behind them. Now, accompanying the trading update to end November, Standard Bank Group CFO Arno Dashne said he expects it will take a few years for the group to return to its targeted band for bad debt expenses. And Volkswagen risked a leadership crisis on Tuesday after Chief Executive Herbert Diess forced a vote of confidence in his reform efforts by asking for an early contract extension. Now, the world's largest vehicle maker by sales is convening its executive committee to discuss Diess's demand long before his current term comes to an end in 2023. Volkswagen chairman Hans-Dieter Porsche is seeking to avert a clash between labor leaders and Diess by postponing discussions about a contract extension. And finally, video conferencing company Zoom says that annual sales will be even higher than expected as the pandemic drives demand for its software. Now, the California firm said revenue could hit more than $2.5 billion, more than twice what it forecast in March. The prediction comes as Zoom shoots to prominence. Millions have now turned to the app to socialize, teach, and meet with colleagues. Zoom founder Eric Yuan says the company was converting more businesses to paying customers as they adapt to a new world of work from anywhere. And that is a look at our company roundup. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. South Africa forecasts a slow recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. And Tunisia's parliament approves a supplementary bill to cushion pandemic impact.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to a thin country.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Tunisia now. The country's parliament has adopted the law relating to the financing of an important part of the state budget for 2020. Now, the controversial legislation authorizes Tunisia's central bank to finance the treasury by granting it an amount not exceeding $1 billion. The funds will be dispersed within 2 weeks upon the adoption of the law. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
Under the supplementary finance bill, the government plans to reach a volume of resources for the Treasury estimated at $7.1 billion against $4.1 billion under the initial finance law. The amount represents a significant increase of $3 billion.
We project a negative growth rate of 7% in 2020, a rate that the economy of modern Tunisia has never seen, not to mention the fall in state-owned resources by 5.6 billion dinars. The increase in spending, especially the 1.1 billion dinars on COVID-19, which led to an increase in the deficit by 11.4% of GDP, not to mention rising unemployment, which reached 16.2%.
Salary expenditures in the supplementary finance law increased by around $190 million to reach $7.1 billion against $7 billion scheduled in the initial 2020 state budget. Similarly, management expenses increased by $109 million to reach about $738 million.
The bleeding of public finances has disrupted all of Tunisia's financial balances and now represents a real danger to national sovereignty. The solution is to master the management of the expenditures and streamline them.
The 2020 public debt services will be around $4.2 billion against $4 billion expected in the initial budget, while the volume of the public debt reached $36 billion, or 88% of GDP.
It's unacceptable to continue with a state budget that exceeds 50% of GDP. This is the result of the failed economic and political policies. We cannot build our future economy by repeating the same mistakes and increasing the volume of debt without creating jobs, development and business opportunities.
The Minister of Finance noted that external loans will also finance the deficit, pending the approval by the House of People's Representatives of other loans. In addition, the state will also resort to borrowing from the domestic market. Prime Minister Hichem Meshishi declared that the supplementary finance budget for 2020 will not revive the national economy, but will rather prevent further deterioration. Meshishi said the situation is the result of several factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic and the lingering economic crisis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Nigeria's beauty market is growing rapidly as demand for beauty products rise. The industry takes in over $1 billion annually since 2018. It has presented a viable market for budding entrepreneurs who are cashing in on the industry by growing their own brands. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam bringing us their stories.
23-year-old Mira Daliop wrapping up the final stage of her makeup production. During the COVID-19 lockdown and amid the university strike, the graduate of geography was keen on putting her time to good use. After nights of research, she birthed a cosmetic line called Mirage Beauty Brand. She produces cosmetic products like lip gloss, balm, and body scrubs from organic extracts.
About 50% of or more of the products, the ingredients I use are organic. There's what we call the Versagel. That's the base for the lip gloss. That's what makes lip gloss. Everything that we use are specifically made for your skin. Everything has to be made for your skin. They work for chapped lips, they heal chapped lips, they prevent you from having chapped lips. They're very moisturizing, hydrating. I put in a lot of love a lot of time and effort into my products, and I make sure that everything is perfect and it's the best for. I test my products for weeks before I sell it to people.
Since launching in August, Mira has a growing customer base across the country, especially for the lip gloss, which has now become her signature piece.
It's really a nice experience. Like when you put it on, it blends in quickly than some lip glosses that I've used. The colors are subtle, not too bright, just nude enough to fit in like your normal lips. And it has a very nice fragrance.
Mira started with a capital of about $200. In 3 months now, she makes an average 50% profit. But it's not been a walk in the park for the young cosmetic producer.
I don't know, sometimes I just lose, because when you make some products, like it doesn't turn out well at all. That's my personal failure now. It doesn't turn out well, but then you have to keep doing. So you lose sometimes. Well, business is a risk that you have to be willing to take.
The cosmetic and personal care industry globally has a turnover of about $400 billion, and in Nigeria, the sector is currently worth $3 billion, according to Euromonitor International. And there are projections that the figures could rise, but it's a highly import-driven industry. So entrepreneurs like Mira are hoping to tap into the multi-billion-dollar industry and expand their distribution beyond the shores of Nigeria. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Plateau, Nigeria.
Now, the World Trade Organization has begun its first Trade for Peace Week. The summit aims to explore the use of trade and economic integration to promote sustainable peace. Now, participants will discuss potential areas of collaboration to use trade as an engine for sustainable development and ultimately an avenue for facilitating sustainable peace. Here's Hannah Viviers with the details.
There are 23 countries currently in the process of joining the WTO. However, more than half of them are grappling with a fragile economy brought on by years of conflict and instability. The WTO's Trade for Peace Week will explore the connection between trade and peace. The focus of the summit will be on fragile and conflict-affected countries which are in the process of joining the WTO and want to use trade and economic integration as a vehicle for sustainable peace and stability.
WTO session is essentially institution building. It really emphasizes the presence of necessary frameworks and practices required to, 1, create a conducive business environment, 2, attract foreign investment, and 3, really set the conditions to facilitate stability and economic well-being. So in doing so, a WTO session helps to mitigate conflict and contributes to peace-building efforts in these fragile environments, and more importantly, it really contributes to the sustainable development goals.
A broad range of topics relevant to trade and peace will be covered at this Trade for Peace edition, among them the use of technology, the role of the private sector, and challenges in the time of COVID-19. Some sessions will zone in on regions and countries involved in the process of joining the WTO, such as Libya, Somalia, South Sudan, Yemen, and Iraq.
Well, in order to become members of the organization, I'll give an example of where I'm from, Sudan. And Sudan, or ITC, has been helping Sudan in resuming its route towards membership of the WTO. It's a multiple process. And there's lots of factors involved that really depend, that are really country specific. But say in Sudan, it's a lot of it has to do with capacity building and meeting the right standards in order to be able to trade their products effectively to meet the standards in the global markets.
One entrepreneur who knows firsthand the link between economic development and sustainable peace is Mahmoud Johnson, founder of J Palm in Liberia.
One of the things that we're excited about with Liberia joining the World Trade Organization is we anticipate there to be more stability and more predictability in terms of how we do business. So things like customs and import and export and taxes, all of these things are important for a stable business environment.
Coming from a country with a long history of conflict, Mahmoud says he fully understands the vital role the development of trade plays in nations such as his.
We are in this post-war period, and the government clearly does not have enough capacity to address all of the many issues with healthcare, with education, with infrastructure. And so it's very critical for businesses and for the private sector to step in and play an active role in helping to address some of the big social issues. And so it's not something that we think of as it's not an afterthought or something that we relegate to say, okay, after we make profits, we donate a portion of our profits to this venture. It's actually integral to our business that in this day and age, we are using our supply chains and using our business models to create opportunities for people to grow their incomes and to live more stable lives, because we know that these are the things that will reduce the probability of us returning to the ugly past of conflicts that we have.
According to organizers, this edition of Trade for Peace Week will also include opportunity for entrepreneurs to network with potential markets. Hannah Vivier, CGTN.
Well, let's now stay on the topic of how healthy business environments can mitigate the probability of conflict. Now, we spoke with a business leader whose organization operates in Lebanon and recently began exploring venturing into North Africa. Maisa Abu Adal Ghanem, he's a chief sustainability officer at Holdal Group, spoke about the ongoing hardships for people in Lebanon, made far worse by the impact of COVID-19 this year, and the extremely challenging business environment. Amongst the issues she raised was the devaluation of the Lebanese currency, which has heavily impacted imports, as well as the enormous exodus of highly skilled people.
On the economic front, the country is really in total collapse, and this has started long before COVID-19 crisis. It's really the accumulation of decades and decades of misgovernance, of corruption, lack of accountability. So massive debt, hyperinflation, devaluation. We're at 80% right now of the devaluation of our local currency, capital control, poverty rate that is achieving now above 50%. For the businesses in Lebanon, the situation is really hard because a large amount of multinationals have closed their doors. A lot of companies have went bankruptcies, and it's directly impacting your employment rates. It's directly impacting your economy. I do believe today that with the WTO membership, it's going to definitely put more pressure on reforms. These reforms are much needed. It's been years and years and years that we feel that we're hearing the same things, we're living the same thing, and it's a vicious circle. So on reforms, it's going to be very important. On trade, you have a country today that is, if we give him the resources from an agricultural point of view, manufacturing point of view, and also all the savoir-faire, we're able to export, but we do not have the enabling environment to do that. And on importation, we are totally isolated. It's been 12 months. The country is like in a cage. We are isolated. So joining the WTO, not only is going to enhance the reforms, not only it's going to push for more accountability, better governance, more transparency in how we trade, more responsibility, but also from a importing and exporting point of view, it's going to put down so many obstacles.
Well, you're watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, still coming up on the show. A second pharmaceutical manufacturer seeks emergency approval of its COVID-19 vaccine. And China's Hainan Free Trade Port takes effect from December 1st.
Again, he can holding guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Just about 5:30, let's recap other news making headlines this hour. In Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the rehabilitation and reconstruction of Tigray is the next step. The Prime Minister announced the end of a military offensive in the northern region against a local political faction. Now, addressing Parliament on Monday, Abiy said another task is bringing culprits of the conflict to face justice. And a diplomatic row between Kenya and Somalia has escalated, with Mogadishu recalling its ambassador and expelling the Kenyan ambassador in the country. Somalia claims Kenya is interfering in its internal affairs, but Kenya denies this and says Mogadishu should focus more on beneficial bilateral issues. And World AIDS Day is being marked today. An annual report by the United Nations has documented some positive trends, but it also warns that the coronavirus pandemic could reverse some gains. Now, the report shows that 38 million people are living with HIV as of 2019, with 1.7 million new infections last year. And China's Chang'e 5 robotic lunar probe has safely landed on the moon. It's the world's first moon sample mission in more than 40 years. It is expected to undertake the country's first collection of samples from an extraterrestrial body. If this mission is successful, it will make China the third nation to bring samples back from the moon after the United States and former Soviet Union. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech are in a tight race to launch their COVID-19 vaccines in Europe after both applied for emergency EU approval on Tuesday. The applications came a day after Moderna sought emergency use for its shot in the US. US drug maker Pfizer and its German development partner BioNTech said their vaccine could be launched in the European Union as early as this month. The European Medicines Agency clouded the timeline. However, when it said it will complete its review for that vaccine by December 29th at the latest, and for Moderna's shot by January 12th. It also added its schedule may be subject to change as its evaluation proceeds. Now, the European Commission said it will likely give its final authorization for vaccines rollout days after a recommendation by the EMA. Now, as pharmaceutical manufacturers continue to ask American and European authorities for emergency approval of their COVID-19 vaccines, there's still some hope of having an effective vaccine against the virus by the end of this year. Here's CGTN's Owen Fairclough reporting.
The race to bring the first COVID-19 vaccines to people here in the United States could be over within a matter of days. That's after drug maker Moderna announced it's filing paperwork with the Food and Drug Administration asking for emergency approval to roll out that vaccine. That follows rival Pfizer, which has already submitted that paperwork, and the FDA is due to discuss Pfizer's request on December the 10th. If both of these drug makers get their approval, while Moderna may be in a position to roll out some 20 million doses of its vaccine here in the US by the end of the year. Pfizer, for its part, has some 50 million doses, though they're expected to be shared with other governments around the world who've put in their orders. The challenges to roll out vaccines like this are enormous, not least because Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines have to be stored at sub-zero temperatures. In the case of Pfizer, at minus 70 degrees centigrade. Moderna perhaps has the drop on Pfizer because its own vaccine has to be stored at minus 20 degrees centigrade. But the nation's top immunologist, Anthony Fauci, urged caution about how quickly these vaccines can be rolled out.
There are a couple of aspects to getting vaccine into the arm of someone who needs it. One is to get it transported from the place where it's made and stored to the local state and city areas. That's being handled by General Gus Perna and the military and the transport of that. Once it gets there, it's the state and local authorities who are responsible for the distribution.
And yet those vaccines can't come soon enough here in the United States, where cases have been skyrocketing and are expected to climb even higher after millions of people ignored health advice not to travel during the Thanksgiving holiday, millions taking off around the United States and flying, even if there were a fraction of the typical numbers for travel at this time of year. And if there's pressure on these rival drug companies to get these vaccines out as quickly as possible, the World Health Organization has been sounding a note of caution about one particular study from AstraZeneca, which has developed a vaccine in conjunction with the University of Oxford. Doubts have emerged about the effectiveness of that vaccine, and the World Health Organization urged against companies lauding these results by press release.
There's only, first of all, a limited amount that can be said in a press release, and secondly, it really needs to be reviewed in terms of the data and questions asked about the data that may come up in the course of the review.
Even so, if there's pressure on the drug makers, there's of course pressure on governments around the world to try and get these vaccines out as quickly as possible, with cases rocketing around the world. And despite doubts over the effectiveness of AstraZeneca's vaccine, it hasn't stopped the governments of Thailand and the Philippines from ordering tens of millions of doses. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
And now let's turn our attention to southern China's Hainan Free Trade Port, whose first zero tariff list will take effect on December 1st. The new list, together with a duty-free shopping policy, is making Hainan increasingly attractive as both an investment destination and a place where consumption will see a boost. Here's CGTN's He Weiwei with more.
The first zero-tariff list implemented in Hainan's free trade port includes 169 items, ranging from coconuts and coal to components for aircraft and ships. For many companies, it means saving a lot of money.
因为我们这个生产的原料
This list includes some of the raw materials we import and the products we export. So we estimate this policy would save us about 80 million yuan per year.
节省8000万左右的成本。
The petrochemical industry has long been an economic pillar in Yangpu, a pilot area for the Hainan Free Trade Port. In this petrochemical park, many new projects are still under construction, but they have already completed the largest refined oil depot in Asia. The zero tariff policy is seen as strong motivation to attract more investments.
It aims to attract more high-end manufacturing enterprises to invest and set up factories in Hainan, so as to build up a modern industrial chain in the free trade port.
In the 6 months since China unveiled its plans for the Hainan Free Trade Port, the island province has released some exclusive policies. While the zero tariff measures will benefit companies, individuals are attracted by the duty-free policy. This is the largest duty-free shopping mall in Asia. A policy released in July raised the annual duty-free purchasing allowance to 100,000 yuan per person. That makes Hainan a destination for consumption. This is for a holiday?
Just for the weekends, actually, yes.
You came here just for shopping?
Pretty much.
I used to fly to Thailand for duty-free shopping, but now there is no need to travel abroad.
From July to October, Hainan duty-free sales exceeded 12 billion yuan, about $1.8 billion, which is more than the total sales in the province in 2019. Dubbed as China's Hawaii, Hainan is working on developing more diversified industries besides tourism. It aims to liberalize trade and investment on the entire island by 2025. He Weiwei, CGTN, Hainan Province.
Now, it's not much to look at, but the humble shipping container has been responsible for slashing international transportation costs and providing a major boost to international trade for decades. That's not the case anymore, however, at least for now. The Shanghai Shipping Exchange has released its latest freight cost index, and the numbers are well over double those of April. Here's CGTN's Zhang Xishuan with the details.
8 feet wide, 8 feet and 6 inches high, and 40 feet long. It's just a corrugated steel box. But it now can cost as much as $5,000 to put it on a ship and send it somewhere. Some carriers are now charging even more than that, calling it a peak season surcharge, usually several hundred more dollars per container. And even at that high price, the containers are short in supply.
It's a long cycle, right?
And this has affected Wang Xin, an expert professional, busy working with clients to help deliver their products around the world by sea. His days have become even tougher during the past few months. The problem is that shipping containers usually move back and forth along the same route, but interruptions to international trade caused by COVID-19 now mean that many containers ship off to one port and then get stuck there. Container freight shipping is finding many of its containers are on the wrong side of an ocean.
Recently, it's very booming. Also, carrier push up the rate and the equipment shortages everywhere. All the teams is on the neck actually because of the workload and the high demanding from the supply. The volume is suddenly booming, and the carrier they not yet prepare well themselves. Before we can normally pick up the container 10 days before the required setting, but now only 5 or 6 days before the ETD.
All this is caused by imbalance between the rising demands of exporters and the tight supply of containers, and it's a challenge worldwide. Freight rates between Shanghai and the UK rose nearly 4 times between March and November, while rates from Shanghai to Los Angeles more than tripled.
I'm in the sea freight industry for almost 25 years. I've not actually seen such a situation before, because there were times in the past where it's isolated to a single trade lane. For example, during the European crisis, we saw freight rate actually drop to actually a double digit. But this time around, the big difference is we are seeing that push of demand and supply imbalance across all trade lanes. Because of COVID, a lot of our ports in Europe, in USA are also seeing a lot of reduction in productivity. Air freight volume has come down. A lot of other reason is because we are seeing a migration of orders from Southeast Asia into China, because we do see other countries within Asia still on lockdown.
And the heaviest impact is being felt by local trading firms. This Shanghai-based textile exporter had seen its orders double or triple as of September. But a sudden rise in freight rates has turned the seemingly good news right around. Mainly exporting fabrics to Europe, Africa, and the US, the company has seen its freight rates more than triple since September.
We have almost 1140 feet high queue. It was ready, I think, by the 15th of October. We were planning to ship them to Port of Sudan. It's for ladies' scarf. But unfortunately, when the goods is ready, we were informed by the shipping line there's no space available. I think until last week, they hardly give us 2 space, let us to ship the container. RMB rate start to appreciate since the date, I think, 21st of October. If we cannot container, we can get a container, we can only hold the goods on our hand, which means buyer will never pay us before the container reaching the port. We only suffer the loss from the rate.
Currently, more than 50% of the company's deliveries are delayed, meaning big potential losses. In October, China's export volume topped 1.6 trillion yuan, jumping 7.6% year-on-year, the 7th consecutive month of positive growth since the coronavirus outbreak. But delivering those products overseas has become more and more expensive because of the increased shipping costs. So how are the companies coping?
We are thinking to switch the transportation from sea to inland and truck transportation. This will save us a lot of time, mainly. Although the price of inland transportation twice expensive than the sea freight, but it will save our time and especially help our factory to catch up their production plan.
Everyone knows this is just a short-term solution, however. Sea freight is irreplaceable for the large volumes and low costs that modern trade requires. He predicts that this round of rises in freight rates will continue at least until the spring of next year. Zhang Shisheng, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And moving on now, Italian artisan Marco Ferrigno makes nativity scenes and statuettes throughout the year to reap profits over the Christmas shopping season. But this year, he is struggling to keep his business afloat as the pandemic has drawn lots of visitors away.
Marco Ferrigno is the heir to a family tradition that dates back to 1836. He's one of the few tens of nativity crafters who have made the little alley of San Gregorio Armino in Naples, which is known for excellence in terms of figurines and nativity crafts. Like many of his fellow artisans, Ferrigno is struggling to keep his shop open during the pandemic.
Noi seminiamo tutto l'anno, gennaio, febbraio, marzo, aprile.
We sow the seed all year long. We invest hours of work, sweat, passion. And at this time, we are supposed to harvest. At this moment, there will be no harvest for sure, or it will not be like the past years.
Ferrigno said online sales are keeping his business alive, but it does not compare with the experience of visiting the craft shops.
The customers want to touch the statuette of the shepherd with their own hands. They want to choose it. Sometimes there are people coming here just because it's a tradition, and then starting from this tradition, they buy something, and it creates a 36 degrees spin-off.
Italy, the springtime European epicenter of the pandemic, has seen a sharp resurgence in infections this fall that pushes COVID-19 death toll to over 54,000, the second highest in Europe after Britain. The government opted against a second nationwide lockdown. Instead, it imposed restrictions on a regional basis based on caseloads and the ability of the health system to respond. Ding Xue, CGTN.
Now, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has influenced New York's traditional holiday window store displays in a variety of ways. Macy's is using its windows to say thank you to essential workers and activists in 16 different languages. The interactive displays allow visitors to create personal scrolling messages. Now, Bloomingdale's hired out-of-work Broadway costume designers and local artists to help create their festive windows. The store is using scents to enhance the viewing experience by sending out the fragrance of pine alongside a window that features a green Christmas tree created with stuffed teddy bears. Saks Fifth Avenue took inspiration from the city for its presentation, featuring scenes of Brooklyn's Dyker Heights and the Roosevelt Island tram. Meanwhile, experts from UNESCO and the International Council of Museums warned back in May that nearly 13% of the world's museums may never reopen due to economic strains from the pandemic. Now, as the industry deals with the trying times, many museums in China are now providing virtual tours instead, inviting gallery goers to enter the art world via computer and phone screens.
Although the pandemic has largely been brought under control in China, it left visitors facing a raft of restrictions in the country's museums. But virtual reality technology is helping to provide an alternative experience free of such limitations. Chinese mega tech firm Tencent is working to launch virtual tours of various museums via the mini programs of its social media platform WeChat.
New technologies and innovative methods are allowing ordinary people to be more connected with traditional cultural heritage.
Liu says the dramatic growth in interest from the public is a rare positive spin-off from the pandemic.
Since its launch, virtual museums on mini programs have been viewed over 20 million times. The pandemic has stimulated and promoted online museum tours.
As well as visiting museums online, people can also purchase products on WeChat and other e-commerce platforms. Tmall, one of the largest e-commerce platforms in China, is finding the main interest coming from younger shoppers.
There's been an exponential growth in scales of museum-related products. They've seen a fourfold increase from a year ago. Gifts like stylish home furnishings, delicate dinner plates, and cute homeware are very popular. And 20 and 30-somethings are the main consumers.
Zhang Mengyuan, CGTN.
Well, let's shift focus now. Take a look at how commodity markets performed today. Oil prices ticking up. Of course, all eyes were on the expected talks between OPEC and its allies. However, they postponed those talks, and the talks were meant to be on whether to increase output in January, as important players had not reached a consensus just yet. Now, those talks may resume on Thursday this week. Meanwhile, gold prices recovering today from 5-month lows as worries over spiking COVID-19 cases offset optimism over vaccine developments. And of course, that helped to nudge investors towards the precious metal. Well, let's head into a quick break now, still coming up on the show. South Africa records an increase in the number of waste collectors.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent, to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, there's been an increase in the number of waste collectors in South Africa. Unemployment rates in the country have soared to an all-time high of 30.8%, and that's amid the coronavirus pandemic. That now has forced many to turn to the informal sector for work. Here's CGTN's Joy Kiriku with the story on Grassroots.
Many South Africans are now turning to waste as a source of revenue. They sell cardboard boxes, plastics and glass bottles to recycling companies. KDDA Corp is a community recycling company. The owners say the volume of recycling material and the number of waste collectors has increased during the COVID-19 period.
Yes, people, elderly people from 60 years old, 72 years old that come here and just to put a bread on the table. So we can't say no to them.
Wahid Peterson is unemployed. He has turned to collecting waste to earn a living.
I got 2 children. They depend very much on me.
I have 2 children. They depend very much on me. Before the lockdown, it wasn't so hard. When the lockdown started, it became very hard for us to find the plastic and to get money to put food on the table for the children. Sometimes they cry, they are hungry, and we don't know what to do.
For Claudine McKenna, she traveled hundreds of miles to Cape Town. She lost her job as a domestic cleaner during the pandemic. Now she works as a recycler.
Hi, my name is Claude McQueen. Right now, I am doing recycling of polythene, cans, and so forth. I am now able to send money to my sister to provide for my son. It's difficult to find work now because of COVID-19. Everyone is doing this because this is an income for people who don't want to steal or rob.
For many who would not have taken up waste collection before the pandemic, it's now aiding many in fending for their families. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currency. South Africa's rand leading gains across emerging markets after some encouraging economic data, while most other currencies retreated after posting strong monthly gains. That's despite positive Chinese data today. Now, the rand rose as much as 0.6% to the dollar. We saw Nigeria's naira stabilizing at forex markets as the CBN moved to boost liquidity. It, of course, still remained at over 3-year lows against the dollar, closing at 500 naira per dollar at the parallel market. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.